You want it? We have it. The hottest mortgage and real estate strategy broadcast in the nation. A Smarter Way Home with your host, Danielle Boote and Victor Bals. 50 years combined experience, ranked in the top 1% in the nation for home loan originations 2020. Promise to expand your knowledge, utilizing creative mortgage financing and home buying strategies. Build a bridge for a better quality of life. Get your brain cells firing for a smarter way home. And welcome to another episode of A Smarter Way Home. My name is Victor Bals. I am your host, loan originator for over 20 years. I eat this stuff for breakfast. And today I do not have a co-host. Mrs. Danielle Boote is in Cabo, Mexico on a president's trip. So I will be flying solo today, but my guest is Mr. Brett Lesperance.
Yep, close enough.
That's kind of difficult. And he is a title agent. And today we're going to talk about title insurance, the importance of title insurance, and everything title insurance. Welcome aboard, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate being here. It's my first time on a podcast, so it's exciting.
Yeah, your first time on a podcast. Yeah. So anyway, so you're in the title, and title is... It's a necessary evil. It's actually not an evil at all. It is very necessary.
Right.
So for our listeners, what is the importance for a title for a house?
Well, title insurance, basically what it's doing is it's one of those things that's kind of paid forward. So the seller buys it for the buyer. Buyer then buys it for the mortgage company.
Okay.
What it's doing is just ensuring clear title to the property. So it's making sure that nobody can come out of the woodwork, a past relative or a person that worked on the house or something and claim that they have a stake in that property.
So if I was like a contractor, I could actually put a lien on that house and that would go on title?
Correct. It would be recorded, which then in turn, the way it should work is that should pop up when we do a title search. Okay. And we should see that and realize that we need to either reach out to them, find out if they've been paid, get that removed, or make sure that they get paid when they sell the home.
Wow. So you got to have a clear title to make you safe.
Yes.
So there's no liens. I actually had a situation, one of my past customers, he went out and bought a home and paid about, I think it was like $350,000 cash he paid for the house.
Yeah.
And he was trying to save some money, so he never went and got owner's title policy.
Right.
Okay, well, he had come back to me about a year later. He wanted to pull cash out of the house, a cash out refinance. So we started the situation and we ordered title, and here comes a $270,000 lien on that property. So we couldn't pull any cash out, and now there's a lien on that property that he's responsible for.
Right.
Can that go away at all? Do you know?
That in that situation, I don't know. I mean, it's very situational, but there's a lot of different ones like that. There's been some where like a house was somehow built on like over a sewer main, things like that, where then once there's an issue with that main, then they realize like, okay, this house should have never been built here. And they essentially have to tear it down. I mean, they have to access that main, and it goes right underneath the house. And in that situation, I think they did end up demoing the house, but the title insurance then covered those people for their loss.
Wow. Oh, so the title insurance, it is an insurance. Okay. Right.
Yes.
Right. Yes. So when we do a standard home purchase and the seller offers the owner's title policy, what do you guys do from a title perspective to show that it's clean? Is there some type of search or something like that?
Yeah, so we do a search with the county. We actually have an examiner. We have one of the best examiners from what I understand in the county. She's very hands-on, very meticulous, goes to the county, pulls the records, goes through, checks for anything like that.
How far back do they go?
40 years, typically.
They go back 40 years.
Yeah.
And that shows the whole, chain of title of everything that's happened on that property?
Correct, yep.
Okay. And what if someone is deceased but is on title? How does that get cleaned up?
So that would be, some of these things I don't know the actual specifics on, but that would be like, I guess you'd consider that they would have to go back and figure out who then has that property, who they left it to, if they left it to anybody, if it's in probate or what the deal is. But that would be something that would have to get cleared. And we've come across that quite a bit. And that's why typically we always tell agents too, when you get a listing, always order pre-title. Pre-title is free, and pre-title is going to find those things that would be something that may take you a month, 2 months, 3 months sometimes to get cleared. It's better to know right away to get that taken care of so we can start working on it and figure out exactly what we need to do to get that title cleared.
So when a real estate agent goes and does a listing for a potential seller, it is always wise to pull this pre-title to see if there's anything creeping, any leaning
Yes.
in the background there.
Yes, it's free, like I said, and it gives you a window into what's going on well ahead of a purchase agreement. It just gives you a foot forward to figure out exactly what you need to do. If anything, I mean, a lot of times they'll come back, there's nothing on it, but once
And that's
in a
what you
while-
want. You want
Yeah,
nothing on there.
Exactly. But you never know. You always we find a lot of weird, wild stuff. So it's not to say it's uncommon. So it's always a great idea to go ahead and take advantage of that.
Well, I have a situation here that we just finally closed last week, but this purchase agreement came in 5 months ago, and anyway, what had happened, the seller, he had bought the home on a land contract,
Yeah.
27 years ago or something
Right.
like that. He had paid it off, the land contract, but the seller never gave him the deed, right?
Right.
Nothing was recorded that everything was paid off. So he tried to sell the house to this young lady, and we started doing the mortgage and the title come back, and the seller was not even on the name of the title because of the original land contract holder, and he had died.
Right.
He died.
Yeah.
So this seller never even had the legal right to sell the home he thought he did own. He didn't. He never had the deed.
Right.
Once he paid off the land contract. So this had to end up going to probate court, right? That took about 3-4 weeks, right? And then after the probate court, it has to be published in the newspaper to see if
Right.
there's anybody out there that's going to raise a claim on this. And that took an additional, I think that was 4 weeks or something, 4 or 6 weeks. They got to put it out there. And then after that 4 to 6 weeks period, then there was a 21-day waiting period.
Right.
So this dragged out for 5 months. And this young lady who bought the home, she was coming out of an apartment, so she let her lease go. She had nowhere to go. She had all her stuff packed, so she had to move back home with mom until we cleared this up, and we had to go through numerous lock extensions at high cost.
Right.
It was just unbelievable, and it all boiled down to the listing agent did not pull pre-title on that house and clear this up before they listed the home.
Yeah, exactly. That's something that you could have gotten out in front of and at least, like you said, waited to list it. You go back to your seller and let them know, like, hey, we got to get this straightened out first.
Right.
Which, especially in this environment with rates climbing the way they are, like you said, I mean, it costs a ton of money to keep locking in that rate. And you would have known that ahead of time. Not that it would have changed anything, because you still would have had to wait to list and rates would have been higher, but it's definitely going to leave a bad taste in that buyer's mouth.
Well, here's what's funny, because as we originally locked her in on a 30-day lock, or a 45-day lock, and all this stuff started coming out. We didn't know how long this was going to take, so we let that lock expire for 30 days. Then we went ahead. It looked like there was some light at the end of the tunnel. But rates had went up, okay, and she went from 5.25. Now she's at 6.875. Wow. And she had to pay discount points. So it really put that buyer in a really bad situation.
Yeah.
But
or a situation where they can't even buy any longer because they may not even qualify at that new payment.
They may not. Yeah, it was very tough to get her to qualify. But thank God we got it done, And so she's a happy camper. But boy, that young lady earned her master's degree in buying homes. And she surely understands about title work now.
No doubt. Yeah, it's one of those things where it's kind of, I mean, it's almost like any type of insurance. You know what I mean? You can't, it's hard to sell something that has an intangible value, and you don't understand the value of it until you actually have had to use it. Just like auto insurance. You're like, man, I'm paying this every month and I don't see the value in it. I've never had an accident. And then you total your car and you're like, now I see the value.
Absolutely.
But, title insurance, the only difference is too that you pay for it one time. I mean, that's it. You pay for it. It's not like you pay monthly or yearly.
Well, and in most cases, the owner's policy is generally paid for by the seller.
Correct.
However, it could be negotiated where the buyer has to pay for that.
Yeah.
And then there's the mortgage title insurance, right? The lender policy. And that is passed on to the buyer. And that is not to protect the buyer. That is actually to protect the lender.
Correct.
That it's free of any liens.
Right.
In case the lender has to take action upon that potential home buyer.
Yes, exactly.
Very interesting stuff. So what's some of the other dirt? What are some of the other war stories you hear on some of this title stuff?
A lot of them, I mean, the toughest thing is too that sometimes we can find all these things and now they're written out in the policy. And when we send all this stuff over to agents, It's the agent's job then. It's our job to find it, which we do. And then it's their job to then read this and then also pass it on to their clients and the other agent, or the other agent should get a copy of it as well anyway, so they should read through it. One situation we had, this was probably 7 months ago now, where we're at the closing table. We have the owner's affidavit where we go through and we ask them these questions. You know, there's no boundary line disputes, no bankruptcies, no. One of them is you haven't agreed to sell or lease the oil mineral
rights.
Right.
Okay.
We had one of those that at the closing table, the guy says yes. So we're like, okay, you know, what's the deal with it?
So the seller wants to keep the mineral rights?
No, the seller had actually, not the seller himself, but previous owner back in the 40s had taken basically this gas company leased the rights, but they keep renewing the lease. So the rights don't go with the property. This gas company actually had the rights to the, you know, anything underneath it.
Really? So that gas company could legally enter the premises, enter the property and start drilling or whatever
Well,
they do?
They had to look into, that's why it just kind of slammed the brakes on the whole thing at the closing table. The buyers actually walked out because they were nervous to discuss anything there. They wanted to leave and kind of figure out what the heck was going on. And it turns out it wasn't a big deal. They ended up closing on it, but it was 6 months later.
Really?
Yeah. And at the time, the buyers had, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of $10,000 wrapped up into this property because they had surveys done. They had builders and contractors come out there. For some reason, they had to have an engineer come out and look at it. So they had a lot of money tied up in this deal already. And if it wouldn't have worked out, they would have walked away and lost all that money over something that was, in fact, given to the realtors on both sides. So that was kind of a ball drop, you know, there. And then, but, you know, silver lining is we had a training on it. We talked to the realtors. We let them know, like, hey, this shows up in this paperwork. It's very important that you read it because 9 times out of 10, there's nothing, but it's that one time that makes you really learn, like, oh, shit, I should probably be reading this.
Right.
Because it said it right there in the requirements that the oil rights had been signed off to this company. So that was really messy and a big learning experience for myself and for both the agents involved.
Wow. So let's say I was to sell my home. Could I keep the mineral rights?
I believe you can. I believe it would have to be, you'd have to record something. I don't know how exactly you do that, but yeah, you absolutely could. It's not common, but it's done. And like in this particular situation, it was this gas company that apparently they had done this back in the 40s. And in order to do it, this entire area had to agree to it. So it was like some, you know, whatever acreage amount that was in a square had to all agree to it. So it's on all this property in this area. So it turned out it wasn't really a big deal. They obviously haven't been active. It was in the 40s. They just keep renewing it. They pay them like $15 a year or something. But they then when they dug into it, the requirements said like they can't drill within this area, you know, blah, blah, blah. So it wasn't really anything that had a major effect, but it's like one of those things that when it happens, you're like you said, what does that mean? Can they come and, you know, rip a hole in my garage floor and put a pump there if there's something underneath it? Or so they just had to get some clarity. But it's one of those things we could have just cleared up well ahead of time had they read the paperwork.
What do you know about ladybird deeds? These seem to be becoming a lot more popular now. Can you speak on that at all?
I myself don't know much about them. I know that we typically will not do them. Okay. And I don't know why.
Because I know an attorney can draw them up.
Correct.
You know, and a ladybird deed, basically, if I was to add my daughter as a lady on a ladybird deed, basically the house goes to her when I die. It just automatically passes over to her. You know, and a lot of times when we do mortgages, we'll pull title or someone, it'll be a first-time home buyer, right? And if they're on a first-time home buyer, they can't have a mortgage or own any other property. And all of a sudden it comes up in all the searches that this particular person owns a piece of property. And they go, I don't own any property. Right. However, somebody had put them on the deed as a ladybird deed.
Right.
You know, sometimes we got to clean that up there too. So that gets kind of crazy. So is it wise for any seller to just pull some title work and see what their title is? Or
I mean, I don't see how it could possibly hurt. I mean, the best way to do it would be to get it where you're going to list it, have the realtor do it because it's free for them. a seller off the street, if they just came in and wanted us to start pre-title, I think it's like $200 just so we have something as a retainer to start this work, because it is extensive work, and Elaine has to actually go to the courthouse and pull these records and go through all these files. And but again, not a big cost when you're talking about, hundreds of thousands of dollars and possibly slowing down that transaction, especially the last 2 years when houses weren't sitting on the market for 3 days. It's like, had you gotten out ahead of that and knew, you would have saved yourself a ton of headaches.
So let me ask you, so on television, I see a lot of these things here that kind of scares people, saying, oh, someone just, they'll put themselves on title and then they'll go get a loan on your house and they take it. What do you know about that? How easy is it for me to go, let's say, put a lien on your house? Could I go do that?
As far as how you could do it, I guess you could. I don't know. I mean, title insurance is going to protect you from a situation like that as far as any legal fees incurred, because it would be very hard for if, we got to the point where we went and tried to prove that. You'd have to show something, a contract, you did work here, we signed, there was some exchange. But yeah, I mean, I guess people could.
Yeah, because that often scares me. Like, God, I wonder if anybody put their name on, somehow, with all the fraud out there.
Right.
Can they do that? And when something is recorded, is somehow the homeowner notified? Would I be notified if somebody was to put something on my title?
I think there's actually some programs now, kind of like a LifeLock type of deal.
I believe Livingston County, if you sign up, if there's anything on your title, they will actually notify you.
Right. So there's, different counties have different deals. Counties outside of those that don't do that, I believe there's kind of like a LifeLock type security subscription deal you can get that will alert you, kind of like when they, trigger your credit. It'll alert you when there's been any changes or anything recorded against your property.
So me as a homeowner, could I just go down to where do you go? To the courthouse?
Yeah, you could go to the courthouse.
Is that where you go? Is that where all the records are kept?
You could. I mean, you can even do it online. Most of them you can do it online.
So I could go search my property and look at the chain of title?
Yeah, absolutely.
Really? And how would I access that? Where do you go to?
So you just go to county records.
Okay.
And then you just basically type in your address, lot number, whatever it is you have. And I think it's limited as far as what you can access, but I believe you can pay and actually access more detail on it.
So I could get a copy of my mortgage. I could get a complete history of the house, even going back to the permits, I guess?
Yeah.
Really?
To see that, nobody did anything unpermitted, which is stuff we can do too. If somebody wants to come in and do that just out of curiosity, or if they have some suspicion that something happened, we could absolutely do that for them and check it out.
What about encumbrances and stuff like that? The neighbor's shed is on my land. Do you ever see those type of issues?
Not often. There was one not too long ago that actually the entire street, when you look at the property lines, they were all shifted. So I don't know if it was they started with a bad starting point or what. But so basically it looked like everybody down the block was on everybody else's property. But it was one of those things where it was so clear what had happened, it just had to be reset. But their starting point of however they measured must have been off. Okay. And so everybody's properties were overlapping all the way down the street.
Well, and one of the things I know when I get a purchase agreement, and to this day, I'm not very good at it, but it gives the legal description, and these things are sometimes paragraphs long.
Yes.
What is the definition of a legal description when you see all these feet north, go here, and all that stuff? Any way you can explain that?
Clarity-wise, probably not too well. I mean, those are all just measuring markers and, how they start, where they end, descriptions, but that's basically what it is. It's just in this code that not a lot of people understand how to read. When we get to the closing table and they look at the warranty deed transferring ownership, and it has that on there, legal description. People always look at it. It's funny too, because a lot of people look at it and they read through it as if they understand it. When I know they don't. They're just, doing their due diligence. And then they sign it. They have no idea what it was, but luckily I have a team. So like Elaine is our examiner. She's amazing at the job. We have Nicole Blevins, who's our processor.
Yes,
also
I've worked
amazing.
with her for over 20 years. She's a great gal.
Yeah, so she has 30 years experience, knows it inside and out. So a lot of this stuff I rely heavily on my team to handle. As far as the documents at the closing table, I understand them, but when it comes to the intricacies of everything, I trust them wholeheartedly.
Well, a lot of times, this has happened, several times in my career, where the legal description is wrong.
Yes.
How does that happen?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, on final policy, when we input it, it's very tedious work and very detailed. I mean, you're talking one letter, one number changes.
1 degree.
Yeah, and it's something totally different. So that's, again, back to when we do the search, that's what we're checking for. We have a lot of those at closing, actually, where there's, a change to the property description because it was wrong.
Well, but how do we know what was right?
Right. Well, typically what they'll have to do then, it would be in a situation where you couldn't tell what was right. You'd have to have a survey done. They'd have to actually go out there and attach a new legal description to it.
So that's a stake survey, and that's the costly one, not a mortgage survey, but a stake survey.
Right.
To find out exactly.
Yeah. Which point they'd have to go out there and actually, pull tape and figure out what the heck's going on.
And that's time consuming as well.
Yeah, very. Wow. Especially when it was really, really busy, very much so. Now, you can typically get it done within a week because, they're like everybody else, they're hungry and want the work. But when it's busy, it takes a while.
So when people combine properties or combine lots, or they actually split off lots, what is that process? Because that's all about title too, right? What happens there?
Well, you would actually have to, in the instance of a split, then you would have to attach a new legal description to it because it becomes a different piece of property. So let's say you just had a big 10-acre parcel. You were going to split it into 2 5-acre parcels. Now your legal description is going to change. Let's say it says this degree's here, this degree's here. Well, that obviously goes from start to end. That's going to get shortened on one, changed on the other. So that would be an entirely new property description or legal description for each property. In the case of adding, I believe they just actually stay as 2 separate property descriptions. It would just be the fact that you would own it. And then you can homestead the second one. If you had 5 acres with a house on it, that was your principal residence, and then you bought the 5-acre lot next to you. You can now homestead that because it's attached to your property, but it would more than likely stay as the same legal description. It would just show as 2 lots.
Wow, interesting. So why would an agent want to use tribe title? What sets you guys apart over there?
The biggest thing to me, especially what we typically try to market towards is Keller Williams agents, because of the relationship there and just the same values. Keller Williams kind of sets itself apart because they have this very strong, belief system. And that's because of ownership. We have that same, belief system that's built into us. So it just comes down to service, where you can call, where you're going to get an answer, where you're going to talk to somebody. We're small, smaller when it comes to title. We don't have, escrow department, this department, this department. So it's like everybody's pretty well versed in most of it. So the good thing is you can call there, you're going to talk to anybody. They're going to know who you are. And they're also going to be able to, 9 times out of 10, that person you get on the phone is going to be able to answer your question. But basically it's just service. We have a great examiner, which is a very important part. She's actually there, goes to the courthouse. It's not shopped out. There are now companies that do it on the internet and they just go by computer searches. There's a company in Hawaii that you can actually, kind of subcontract as your examiner. But I mean, I would much rather have boots on the ground in the courthouse than somebody in Honolulu, Hawaii.
Well, then examiner's fine online. It's when you have a problem. How do you talk to that examiner and say, look, we all got to get here at the kitchen table and figure something out.
Right.
And because I love using Tribe, and I know with your agents, I would assume that's a very smoother process, especially for agents going on listings. You urge them to pull pre-title, so we make the entire process smooth.
Yes, and location. I mean, just that alone. I mean, we're 4 doors down from them. They can walk down at any point, walk into the office, and actually get face to face and talk to somebody. Whereas sometimes things get misconstrued or misunderstood when you're going back and forth via text or email. They can just walk down, talk to us. Ease of close, they can close right there, or they can close at KW. We'll pretty much close anywhere anybody wants to. So I would say it's just more of the team. Like, we want them to close their deal as smooth as possible. It just makes them look better. It makes us look better. We try not to use contract closers. So I typically try to close everything myself if I can. And if that means me driving an hour away, I'll do it. Because I know that end process of the deal, the closing itself, is so important because that's the last impression they have of the deal. So some title companies, I'm not going to say names, but some of them use a lot of contract closers. Some of them don't even use contract closers. They use a notary, which that person is unfamiliar with all these documents. They're just there to notarize their signature, and they can't answer any questions.
Wow. That's pretty interesting there, man.
Yeah.
I don't know. That would be a little scary. It's the biggest purchase of your life.
Right.
You know? So, in the last couple of years, we had a seller's market. They list their home. It's gone in 3 days.
Right.
It's gone in 4 days or something like that. But I did see a lot of for sale by owners pop up thinking, God, I could sell this too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of paperwork involved. There's a lot of legalities there. There's a lot that people may not understand. Do you at Tribe help for sale by owners, and do you have a for sale by owner kit to help coach people through?
We will, to a degree. Like if somebody wants a generic purchase agreement or something like that, we'll help them with that. But again, we even let them know, like, hey, just so you're aware, there's a lot of legalities that now you're taking on to your shoulders by doing this yourself.
And what would something like that be? What would some responsibility, or what could happen for sale by owner?
I mean, it could be something as simple as they didn't double check the purchase agreement. They wrote something different on there than was supposed to be, as far as when you get into like occupancy, escrows being held for occupancy, for damage, whether they left something on or off the purchase agreement that was supposed to be on it. So there's a lot of things that, if it goes wrong, it's going to go really wrong. And now they're going to be out of pocket a ton of money for legal help. Whereas if you have an agent, A, the agent knows what they're doing. B, they have a team in place usually where a lot of eyes are going to get on this purchase agreement, make sure everything's right. And then if something does go wrong, they have the legal support and they're obligated to, get it taken care of for you. So you have that team that's going to be in your corner if anything does go wrong, which is huge. Because, you could get into thousands upon thousands of dollars if you actually have to get legal representation because you messed something up.
Yeah. So now, how much does an owner's policy cost? It varies by the price of the home?
Yeah, it's based on price.
So is it pretty economical?
It's not expensive, especially when you're talking insurance, especially for what it provides. Like it's one of those things, again, like insurance, you don't realize the value till you use it. You get into a case where, you could get into the tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees incurred, which is all going to be covered. To give you a really, really rough ballpark, I would say on a $350,000 home, you're probably looking like $1,250, $1,300.
Okay. Not that bad.
No.
And that's kind of standard practice out there. Do that. So now there's different types of title. And, me being in the mortgage business 20 years, I still get them confused. There's title with exceptions, without exceptions. There's these Alta A policies. What are some of these types? What does that mean?
Some of them just get into coverages, just better coverages, more in
What
depth.
would be a better coverage? What is covered and what is better coverage?
Well, I don't want to misspeak on this, so I'm just going to say like the Eagle, which for example is going to be your better policy. It's going to have a lot more coverages for all these different things that could go wrong. So it's got basically like, let's say 28 more coverages that are going to protect the consumer. And typically you're talking about, let's use that same example. Let's say the $350,000 price point. You're talking about a difference of probably $275 to $350
to get this extra Eagle policy.
Exactly.
And now, what would that cover? Because I think it covers liens, right? If there's a lien on the property, what else could it cover? What else could pop up out of nowhere?
It covers some of the things with surveys. And I don't want to misspeak, but there's a handful of things on there that are not on your typical policy. And I should have brought one because I could read you the differences, but there's a lot of extra protection there.
Well, you mentioned surveys because when you do a title search, you're actually looking for liens and stuff like that.
Right.
But are you stating in that owner's policy I can be protected against surveys in case there was a wrong legal description?
Yeah.
And then that means the title company, because it's insured, you guys would be on the hook for paying it?
Right. For that, to go out there and get it straightened out. Or in the case where you were in the wrong place, or like the one I was describing to you where the whole house was in the wrong place. It's built over a sewer main.
Okay.
Like things like that.
So is there a particular type of dwelling that you may consider, hey, it's this type of property, I would recommend an Eagle policy versus a standard
I would
policy?
always recommend it.
Really?
You're talking, especially when you look at the spread over that amount of time. You're talking pennies. It's just worth it. I owned an insurance agency before I got into this, personal lines, life insurance and things like that. And like, it's one of those things where people hate paying for it, but insurance is, you get what you pay for. You're never going to be overinsured, when it comes down to it. It's very valuable. And especially in a transaction like this, it's huge. It's everything that it's most people's biggest purchase. So pay the extra money, get the better coverage.
Okay. So for example, I'm sure I could dig up an owner's title policy at my house. I guess it's in my closing package.
Right.
I don't know that.
Right.
And, I'd have to look there. And let's say, could I then expand and say, you know what, I want to get some more coverage just to be sure?
That's a good question. And I don't know that you could. I think...
Or I'd have to order a brand new thing because you guys got to do a search.
Yeah, and there's time limits within it. I think you could probably change it to some degree depending on the timing of it. But yeah, and it's, again, like the thing you were saying with your policy, the seller's paying for your policy. Mm-hmm. So it's something that you would usually want to negotiate ahead of time, mm-hmm. because sometimes the sellers, A, have no problem paying for it. And B, especially if you're the buyer on that property, the seller paid for your policy anyway. Even if you want the extra coverage, just pay the difference. Okay. You're paying a few $100.
So I built the house 20 years ago, so I'm sure I got the owner's policy, but I've refinanced several times since then. And now I'm getting a lender's policy each time. Right. Does that supersede the owner's policy? How does that work? Because now I'm pulling new title every time.
That one's basically protecting the lender, which I guess in a roundabout sort of way is protecting you. It's basically that same property, basically saying nobody's going to come claim it as their own. So yeah, as far as the intricacies, again, I don't know those, but
okay. But let me ask you this. So when they pull a new lender's policy, basically it's going to be the same as the owner's policy, because if there was a lien on the owners, it would show up on the lender's policy, and it has to be cleared.
Correct. It's still going to show you that there's clear title to the property.
Okay. So what would be the difference between the lender's policy and the owner's policy? It's just that the lender is protected. That's all?
Yeah, just named insured.
Okay. But I am also insured as the owner against any other liens.
You're still insured from when you originally bought the home.
Okay.
But it does give you peace of mind too, because like you said, they're going to pull a title search. They're going to see, is there anything new on there? Is there any boundary line disputes? Is there anything new recorded against it?
Okay.
So you'll be able to see that as a reference.
And then on the lender policy, they are protecting their interest in the property of that loan amount that they are number one in lien position.
Correct.
Okay, because many times people have several mortgages. They may have a first mortgage and they may have a home equity line of credit.
Right.
And that home equity line of credit will always take
junior position.
Yep. And if I was to sell it, both of those liens, the first and the second mortgage, have to be paid off.
Correct. Or in the situation like in 08 where there's short sales, foreclosures.
Yeah, I remember. I have a client here, and I just refinanced her last year. But what had happened? We went to refinance, we pulled title, we go, hey, what the hell is this home equity line of credit? They go, God, that was back in 2009. That was paid off. And they go, well, no, it shows here you owe $50,000.
Right.
And that particular bank had folded.
Right.
And it was GMAC, and they're in the short sales, and they had sold it off to someone. That one went out of business. And so now there's this lien on that property.
Right.
And we had to go through quiet title process. Yeah. Which got costly for the customer.
Yeah. And that would be the same thing like you were saying on a seller side. Like if they'd have pulled pre-title, if they were going to sell that property, that same issue would have arose. And you could at least start working on it. Like you said, there's a lot of stuff that goes into getting that cleared.
Yeah. Yeah, they had to pay a couple $1,000s.
Yeah, I can imagine.
We actually did close it, and the title company, I don't know, they did something to say, hey, we can close it. We see what happened here, that the bank is dead or they went out of business. Yeah. But she still wanted a clean title because she had to sell the home, and she just recently sold it.
Yeah.
But it took them almost 2 years to get that off the title, and clear it up. So,
and imagine if that was, that was when she went to sell it. You
yeah.
go from thinking you're going to sell this house, and now you got a 2-year process in order to even get it to where you can sell it.
Yeah, so that was a nightmare there. But, hey, so how does one contact you? How does an agent contact you if they want education on title or just to try about, build that relationship and see how you guys can work better together? What's the best way?
Yeah, just call me, or you can go to our website, tribetitle.com. You can call me. at the office or on my cell. My cell's 248-660-4282 or Brett, BRETT, at tribetitle.com. So real simple. Just find us online or give me a call, and I'd be happy to. If I can't answer it for you, I definitely have somebody that can.
You got people.
I have my people.
He's got his people. Okay, everybody. So that'll wrap up today's show. I hope you learned a little bit about title. I always learn a little bit every time I talk to you on that. Right. But anyway, any questions, any concerns, give Tribe Title a call, and we'll see you next time here on A Smarter Way Home.